The air in Charleston was thick with the kind of late summer humidity that made your clothes cling to your skin, but I barely noticed it as I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by ribbons and lace. My hands were steady, threading tiny silver charms onto delicate satin ribbons for the wedding favors. Each one was a miniature seashell, a nod to the beachside ceremony Ethan and I had dreamed up over glasses of sweet tea on my porch last spring. The memory of his laugh, the way he'd leaned in to kiss my forehead and said, "Claire, you're making this perfect," still warmed me as I worked late into the night. My phone sat beside me, glowing with a photo I just sent him, a glimpse of my wedding dress's lace hem, teasing but not revealing too much. His reply came slow, just a quick, "Looks amazing, babe. Meetings all day, talk soon." I brushed it off. Ethan was always busy chasing deals, charming clients. That's who he was. My ambitious, golden-smiled fiancé, off on one last business trip before we'd stand together and promise forever. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind was too full of details, seating charts, the florist's last-minute call about peonies, the way I wanted the fairy lights to drape over the reception tent. By morning, I was bleary-eyed but buzzing with nervous excitement, sipping coffee as the sun crept through my kitchen window, painting the room in soft gold. My phone buzzed on the counter, and I reached for it with a smile, expecting Ethan's usual good morning text, maybe a selfie from whatever sleek hotel he was staying in. Instead, it was a number I didn't recognize. No message, just a single photo. I opened it, and the world stopped. There he was, Ethan, sprawled on a poolside lounge chair, sunglasses perched on his nose, a drink in his hand with a little umbrella sticking out of it. His arm was slung around a woman I'd never seen before, her head tilted back in laughter, her bikini leaving little to the imagination. They looked comfortable, like they belonged together, their drinks matching, their smiles careless. The timestamp was from yesterday, hours after he'd texted me about being swamped with work. My coffee went cold in my hand. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the screen, my thumb hovering over the image as if I could swipe it away and make it untrue. I waited for the tears, the anger, the scream that should have come. But nothing did. It was like my body had forgotten how to feel, like someone had reached inside me and flipped a switch to numb. The kitchen clock ticked softly, the only sound in the room. I set the phone down, my movements slow, deliberate, and picked up the list of wedding plans I'd been tweaking all week. My pen hovered over the first item, confirm caterer, before I drew a single, steady line through it. Then the next. And the next. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't text him. I didn't need to hear his voice to know what I had to do. By noon, I'd canceled the venue, my voice calm as I explained to the coordinator that things had changed. She didn't ask questions, just offered a quiet, "I'm so sorry, Claire." The florist was next, then the band. Each call was a small, sharp cut, but I kept going, my hands steady as I unraveled the life I'd spent months building. The dress was the hardest. I drove to the boutique alone, the gown folded carefully in its garment bag in my back seat. The saleswoman's face fell when I told her I needed to return it. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice soft, like she could see the storm behind my eyes. I nodded, handed her the bag, and walked out before I could change my mind. The rest of the day blurred. I sent emails to guests, a brief message about the wedding being canceled, no explanation offered. My phone buzzed with a concerned text from friends, but I didn't answer. Rachel, my best friend, called 3 times before I finally picked up. "Claire, what the hell is going on?" she demanded, her voice sharp with worry. I told her about the photo, my words flat, like I was reading a grocery list. She cursed Ethan in ways that would have made me laugh on any other day, but I'd just listened, staring at the empty space on my ring finger where his promise used to sit. By evening, I was alone again, sitting on my couch with a glass of wine I hadn't touched. The house felt too big, too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. I kept seeing flashes of him, Ethan twirling me in the kitchen last month, humming a song I didn't know, or the way he'd looked at me when he proposed, his eyes so sure, so convincing. I'd believed him. I'd believed every word. And now, I was picking up the pieces of a future that didn't exist. I thought about my mom years ago, sitting at our old dining table after my dad left. I was 9, too young to understand why she was crying, but I remembered the way she'd smoothed my hair and said, Sometimes, Claire, people aren't who you need them to be. I'd carried that with me, tucked away like a note in a pocket, but I never thought I'd need it. Not with Ethan. Not with the man who'd promised me forever, Dot. The next 2 days were a haze of logistics. I changed the locks on my house, not because I thought Ethan would show up, but because it felt like reclaiming something. I packed his things, his clothes, his books, the stupid coffee mug he loved with the cheesy world's best fiance slogan, and left them in boxes on the porch. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just kept moving. One task to the next, like if I stopped, the weight of it all would crush me, Ethan called on the third day, his voice confused, almost indignant. Claire, what's going on? Why is my hotel canceled? Why is everyone freaking out? I let him talk, let his words spill out, each one a reminder of how little he'd cared to hide his lies. When he paused, I said, "Don't bother coming home. There's nothing left here for you." My voice was steady, colder than I'd ever heard it. I hung up before he could respond. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I started to take myself back. It wasn't loud or dramatic, no grand confrontation or tearful showdown. It was quiet, like the way the tide pulls back before it returns stronger. I wasn't just canceling a wedding. I was canceling the version of me who'd trusted too much, who'd ignored the cracks in Ethan's stories because I wanted to believe in the man I thought he was. Weeks passed, and the world kept turning. I went back to work, planning other people's events with the same precision I'd once poured into my own. My coworkers tiptoed around me at first, their smiles too gentle, their questions too careful. But Julian, my coworker who always seemed to know when I needed a coffee or a laugh, didn't treat me like I was fragile. He'd drop by my desk with a bad joke or a story about his dog. And somehow, those small moments made the days feel less heavy. One afternoon, I was at a cafe with Rachel, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh bread in the air. We were catching up, her ranting about a client, me nodding along, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at it out of habit, expecting a work email. Instead, it was a social media notification, a post from Ethan. My thumb hovered, then clicked. There he was, grinning in a new photo, his arm around the same woman from the pool. The caption read, "New chapter, new adventures." I stared at it, my heart twisting, not with pain, but with something closer to pity. Rachel leaned over, saw the screen, and let out a string of curses that made the table next to us glance over. "That bastard!" she hissed, ready to launch into a plan to ruin him. But I just smiled, a small, quiet thing, and opened my messages. Not to Ethan, but to the woman. I attached a photo he'd sent me months ago, one of us on a beach at sunset, his arms around me, his smile just as bright as it was in her picture. I didn't write anything. I didn't need to. I sent it, closed the app, and raised my coffee cup. "To new beginnings," I said, my voice steady. Rachel grinned, clinking her mug against mine. "Damn right." As we left the cafe, the Charleston sun dipping low, casting long shadows on the cobblestone street, I felt the weight of the past few weeks shift. It wasn't gone, not entirely, but it was lighter. I wondered as I walked how long it would take for that woman to get her own anonymous photo, her own moment of truth. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. The cobblestone street felt solid under my feet, each step a quiet rhythm as Rachel and I walked away from the cafe. The air was cooling now, the kind of evening where the breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine from someone's garden. I tucked my hands into my jacket pockets, my mind still lingering on the message I'd sent. It wasn't spite that made me do it, not really. It was something deeper, a need to close a door that Ethan had left swinging open. I didn't expect a reply, I didn't want one. That single photo, sent without a word, was my way of saying I wasn't invisible, not to him, not to her, not to myself. Rachel was still talking, her voice a mix of indignation and pride. "I mean, Claire, that was stone cold. You didn't even need to say anything, just bam, truth bomb." She mimed an explosion with her hands, grinning like we'd just pulled off a heist. I laughed, a small sound that felt foreign in my throat, like I was relearning how to feel light. "It wasn't about her," I said, glancing at the sunset painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. "It was about me. I needed to let go." She nodded, her expression softening. Rachel had always been my firecracker, the one who'd fight the world for me, but she knew when to let me have my quiet. We parted ways at the corner, her promising to call tomorrow, me promising to actually answer. As I drove home, the city lights blurring past my window, I felt the first real stir of something new. Not quite hope, but possibility. Like the moment after a storm when you realize the trees are still standing. My house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, the porch light flickering like it was on its last legs. I made a mental note to replace it, one of those small tasks that had started to feel grounding. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and padded to the kitchen, the hardwood cool under my feet. The space still felt like it belonged to someone else, someone who'd planned a life with Ethan. His absence was everywhere, in the empty spot where his coat used to hang, in the silence where his laughter used to fill the room. But tonight, it didn't ache as much. I poured a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and let my eyes wander to the window, where the neighbor's porch light glowed softly through the trees. I thought about my grandmother, of all people. She'd been gone for years, but her voice came back to me sometimes, sharp and warm, like she was standing right there. I was maybe 12, sitting on her porch swing while she shelled peas into a bowl. I'd been upset about some schoolyard drama, some friend who'd betrayed me in the way kids do. She'd listened, her hands never stopping, and then said, "Claire, don't ever let someone else's choices decide who you are. You're the one who gets to write your story." I hadn't understood it then, not really, but it stuck with me, a seed planted deep. Standing in my kitchen, I felt it bloom. Ethan's choices weren't mine. His betrayal wasn't my failure. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds outside my window, their chatter pulling me from a dream I couldn't quite hold on to. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, the light filtering through the blinds in soft stripes. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was carrying a boulder on my chest. I got up, made coffee, and sat at the table where I'd once planned a wedding. The notebook was still there, tucked under a stack of mail. I pulled it out, flipped through the pages of crossed out plans, and felt a pang, not of loss, but of clarity. That version of me, the one who'd poured her heart into those details, wasn't gone. She was just learning to dream differently. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into events, losing myself in the chaos of timelines and client demands. There was something comforting about the structure, the way I could control the outcome of a gala or a fundraiser. My colleagues noticed the change, though they didn't say it outright. Julian especially seemed to sense when I needed a moment to breathe. He'd show up at my desk with a coffee, no questions asked, or leave a sticky note with a doodle of his dog, a lopsided grin on its face. "Thought you could use a smile," he'd say, and I'd roll my eyes but tuck the note into my drawer. One afternoon, we were setting up for a charity auction, stringing lights across a ballroom ceiling. I was on a ladder, untangling a knot of cords when Julian called up. "You know, you're going to have to teach me your secret." I glanced down, confused. "What secret?" He grinned, leaning against the ladder. "How you make all this look easy. I'd be swearing at these lights by now." I laughed, surprising myself, and tossed the cord down to him. "Years of practice," I said. But what I didn't say was that every bulb I hung, every table I arranged, felt like proof I could rebuild. That night, after the auction, I stayed late to clean up. The ballroom was empty, the tables cleared, the lights dimmed. I sat on the edge of the stage, my heels dangling, and let the quiet settle over me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I almost ignored it, thinking it was Rachel with another wild idea for a girls' night. But it was a notification from a mutual friend, someone who hadn't unfollowed Ethan on social media. A new post. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. It was a video this time. Ethan and the woman, her name was Lauren, I'd learned from the tags, dancing at some rooftop bar, her arms around his neck, his smile as bright as ever. The caption was simple: "Living my best life." I watched it twice, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to understand why it didn't hurt the way it should have. The Claire from a month ago would have been shattered, would have spent the night replaying every moment of our relationship, wondering where I went wrong. But now I just felt distant, like I was watching a stranger. I thought about calling Rachel, but instead I texted Julian. "You ever feel like you dodged a bullet you didn't even see coming?" His reply came fast. "All the time. Want to tell me about it over pizza?" I smiled, typing back, "Maybe tomorrow. I didn't need to talk, not yet. I just needed to sit with the realization that I was okay. Not perfect, not whole, but okay. The next few weeks were a slow unraveling of the life I'd thought I'd have. I started small, rearranging my living room, painting the walls a soft blue that reminded me of the ocean. I took myself to dinner, just me, at a little seafood place by the water and didn't feel self conscious when the waiter asked if I was waiting for someone. I wasn't. I was enough. One evening. I was sorting through old photos, a box I'd avoided since the breakup. Most were from college, silly moments with friends, but a few were of Ethan and me. One caught my eye, us at a festival, his arm around me, my head tilted back in laughter. I remembered that day, the way the air smelled like cotton candy and sunscreen, the way he'd stolen a bite of my ice cream and grinned like a kid. I didn't tear the photo up, I didn't cry. I just set it aside, a piece of a story that wasn't mine anymore. Then came the twist, the one I didn't see coming. It was a Saturday, and I was at the market picking out tomatoes for salad when my phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I opened the message, expecting spam, but it was a text. Thank you, I didn't know. Attached was a screenshot of the photo I'd sent Lauren, the one of Ethan and me. No name, no explanation, but I knew it was her. I stood there, the market buzzing around me, the smell of fresh herbs and bread in the air, and felt a quiet shift. She'd seen him for who he was, just as I had. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I bought my tomatoes, drove home, and made my salad. As I sat at my table, the evening light spilling across the room, I thought about my grandmother again. You write your story, she'd said, and for the first time, I felt like I was. The salad tasted better than it had any right to, the tomatoes bright and sharp against the creamy feta, the kind of simple meal that felt like a small victory. I ate slowly, savoring the quiet of my kitchen, the way the light caught the edges of my glass of iced tea, casting tiny rainbows on the table. It was just me, the hum of the fridge, and the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. For so long, I'd filled my days with plans, with Ethan's voice, with the weight of a future I thought I needed. Now the silence wasn't empty. It was mine. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes drifting to the window, where the last of the daylight clung to the trees. The text from Lauren, brief as it was, kept circling in my mind. Thank you, I didn't know. I didn't know what she'd done with the truth I'd handed her, whether she'd confronted Ethan or walked away quietly like I had. Part of me was curious, but not enough to chase it. I'd spent too long chasing Ethan's lies, his half truths, the promises he tossed out like coins you find in a pocket. I was done with that. I thought about my dad, strangely, in that moment. Not the dad who left when I was a kid, but the one who'd shown up at my high school graduation, years after he'd faded from our lives. He'd stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in his pockets, looking like he wasn't sure he belonged. I'd seen him from the stage, my cap slipping over one eye, and felt a pang. Not anger, not love, just a quiet ache for what could have been. After the ceremony, he'd handed me a card with $20 inside and said, "You're stronger than I ever was, Claire." I didn't know what he meant then, but sitting in my kitchen, I thought maybe I did. Strength wasn't loud or flashy. It was showing up for yourself, even when the world felt like it was falling apart. The next morning, I woke early. The kind of early where the sky is still gray and the world feels like it's holding its breath. I pulled on a sweater and sneakers and walked to the Battery, Charleston's waterfront where the old houses stand like sentinels, their shutters weathered but proud. The air was cool, the harbor glinting under the first rays of sun. I sat on a bench, my hands wrapped around a to-go coffee, and watched a shrimp boat drift lazily across the water. There was something about the rhythm of this place, the tides, the history, the way life kept moving no matter what. That made my own story feel small but not insignificant. I wasn't the first woman to have her heart broken here, and I wouldn't be the last, but I was the only one who got to decide what came next. Dot work kept me busy, but it wasn't just a distraction anymore. It was a reminder that I was good at something, that I could create beauty out of chaos. We were planning a wedding for a couple in their 50s, a second chance at love after years of loss. The bride, Ellen, had a laugh that filled the room, and her fiancé, Mark, looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Watching them during a tasting, their hands brushing as they shared a bite of cake, I felt a twinge of envy, but it wasn't bitter. It was a quiet longing. Not for Ethan, but for the kind of love they had, real, weathered, honest. Julian noticed me watching them. He was carrying a box of table linens, his tie slightly crooked as usual. You okay? He asked, setting the box down. I nodded, managing a smile. Just thinking about how some people get it right. He tilted his head, like he was trying to read the rest of my thoughts, then said, They're not the only ones who will. It wasn't a promise, just a quiet observation, but it stayed with me as I drove home that night, the radio playing low, the streets of Charleston glowing under streetlights. I started to notice the small things again, the ones I'd overlooked when I was wrapped up in Ethan. The way the bakery down the street always smelled like cinnamon at 7 a.m. The creak of my porch swing when I sat on it with a book. The way Rachel's eyes lit up when she talked about her new pottery class, her hands waving as she described a lopsided vase she'd made. These were the threads of a life I was weaving. Not for anyone else, but for me. One evening, I was at Rachel's place, sprawled on her couch with a glass of wine while she showed me her latest pottery disaster, a bowl that looked more like a squashed pumpkin. We were laughing, the kind of laughter that makes your sides ache, when she got quiet all of a sudden. You know, she said, swirling her wine, I was worried about you. After Ethan. I thought you'd, I don't know, disappear into yourself. But you're different now, stronger. I looked at her, surprised, because I hadn't seen it myself. I don't feel strong, I admitted. I just feel like I'm figuring it out. She grinned, nudging my shoulder. That's what strong is, dummy. Her words echoed in my head as I drove home, the city lights blurring past. I thought about the girl I'd been a year ago, so sure of Ethan, so ready to build a life around him. I didn't hate her. She loved with everything she had. But I was starting to love the woman I was becoming, the one who could sit alone in a cafe and not feel lonely, who could send a message to a stranger and walk away without needing an answer. Then came the second twist, the one that felt like the universe tying up a loose end. It was a Tuesday, and I was at the office going over a contract for a corporate event. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at it, expecting a vendor confirmation. Instead, it was an email from Ethan. My heart didn't race, didn't sink. It just stayed steady, like it was waiting for me to decide what to feel. I opened it, my eyes scanning the words quickly, then again, slower. Claire, I know I don't deserve to write this, but I need to. I messed up. I didn't know what I had until it was gone. Lauren and I, it's over. I saw the photo you sent her, and I know I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I was a coward. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I sat back in my chair, the office humming around me, phones ringing, Julian laughing with a client in the next room. I read the email again, looking for the anger I thought I'd feel, or the satisfaction, or even the sadness. But there was nothing. Just a quiet acknowledgement that his words didn't belong to me anymore. He was right, he didn't deserve to write them. But I didn't need his apology to move on. I'd done that already. I didn't reply. I archived the email, closed my laptop, and went back to the contract. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and checklists, but there was a lightness in me, like I'd finally let go of the last piece of him I'd been carrying. That night, I sat on my porch swing, a blanket over my legs, the air cool and crisp. The stars were out, bright against the Charleston sky, and I thought about my grandmother again, her hands shelling peas, her voice steady. You write your story. I was writing it one small moment at a time. Not a fairy tale, not a tragedy, but something real. Something mine. I thought about the future, not with fear or longing, but with curiosity. Maybe I'd fall in love again. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd travel or start my own event planning business or adopt a dog like Julian's that would chew my shoes and make me laugh. Whatever it was, it would be my choice, my story. And for the first time, that was enough. The porch swing creaked under me, a soft rhythm that matched the hum of crickets in the yard. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, the night air sharp with the first hint of fall. The stars above Charleston were brighter than usual, like they were trying to tell me something I wasn't quite ready to hear. I sipped my tea, the mug warm against my palms, and let my mind wander. Ethan's email was still there, tucked away in my inbox like a forgotten receipt, but it didn't have the power I thought it would. It was just words, and I'd learned the hard way that his words were worth less than the breath it took to say them. I thought about calling Rachel, telling her about the email, but I didn't. Not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't need to dissect it with her. For the first time, I trusted myself to feel what I felt without someone else's voice to guide me. Instead, I closed my eyes and let the memory of my grandmother's porch swing come back. The squeak of the chains, the way her hands moved over those peas, steady and sure. I was starting to feel that steadiness in myself, not all the time, but in moments like this, when the world was quiet and I was enough. The next morning, I woke to the smell of rain, the kind that makes you want to stay in bed with a book. But I had a meeting with a new client, a small business owner planning a holiday party, so I dragged myself up, pulled on a sweater, and headed out. The streets of Charleston were slick with wet leaves, the air heavy with the scent of earth and salt. I parked near the office, my umbrella forgotten, and ran through the drizzle, laughing at myself as water dripped down my face. It was a small thing, but it felt good to laugh, to feel the rain and not care dot at work. The day was a whirlwind of emails and phone calls, but I moved through it with a clarity I hadn't had in months. Julian was there, as always, his desk a mess of sticky notes and coffee cups. He caught my eye during a lull and tossed a crumpled paper ball at me, grinning when I swatted it away. "You're in a mood today," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Good or bad?" I thought about it, tilting my head. "Good," I said, and meant it. He nodded, like he'd known the answer before I did, and went back to his work dot. The client meeting went better than I expected. The business owner, a woman named Carla with a no nonsense smile, wanted something simple but elegant, a party that would make her employees feel appreciated. We talked for an hour, sketching out ideas on napkins, and by the time she left, I felt a spark I hadn't felt in a while. Not just for the event, but for the work itself. I'd always loved planning, the way I could take a vision and make it real. But somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten how much it meant to me. Now, it was like rediscovering a part of myself I'd tucked away. That evening, I stopped by the market on my way home, picking up ingredients for dinner: fresh shrimp, a loaf of crusty bread, a bottle of white wine. I cooked slowly, the kitchen filling with the smell of garlic and butter, the radio playing soft jazz in the background. It was the kind of night I used to imagine sharing with Ethan, but now I didn't mind that it was just me. I set the table for one, lit a candle, and ate by the window, watching the rain patter against the glass. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. As I washed the dishes, my mind drifted to a memory I hadn't thought of in years. I was 16, sitting in my mom's car outside the grocery store, the windows fogged up from the summer heat. She'd just gotten a call from her boss, something about a missed deadline, and I could see her shoulders tense, her voice sharp as she argued. When she hung up, she sat there staring at the steering wheel, and I thought she might cry. Instead, she turned to me and said, "Claire, don't ever let a job or a person make you feel small. You're bigger than that." I'd nodded, not really understanding, but now, scrubbing a pan in my quiet kitchen, I got it. Ethan had made me feel small, not because he meant to, but because I'd let him. I wasn't letting anyone do that again. The weeks that followed were a steady climb. I started running again, not to lose weight or prove anything, but because I liked the way my lungs burned, the way the marsh trails smelled of salt and mud. I'd go in the mornings before the city woke up, my sneakers pounding the dirt, my breath sinking with the rhythm of the tides. Sometimes I'd stop at the edge of the water, hands on my knees, and watch the herons stalk through the shallows, their movements deliberate, unhurried. It made me feel connected to something bigger, something that didn't care about broken engagements or anonymous photos. Rachel noticed the change too. We met for brunch one Sunday at a place with mismatched plates and the best biscuits in town. She was halfway through a story about her latest pottery class when she stopped, fork in midair, and looked at me. "What?" I asked, wiping crumbs from my chin. She grinned, shaking her head. "You're you? Like the real you? Not the Claire who was trying to be Ethan's perfect fiance." I laughed, but her words hit deep. I'd spent so long trying to fit into his world, his dreams, that I'd forgotten what mine looked like. Now, I was starting to see them again. Work kept me grounded, but it was the small moments that started to feel like home. Coffee with Julian, where we'd talk about nothing and everything. His dog's latest escape attempt. My obsession with true crime podcasts. Painting my bedroom a soft gray, the kind that made the room feel like a sanctuary. Sitting on my porch with a book, the pages curling in the humid air, the sound of kids playing down the street. These were the pieces of a life I was building. Not for anyone else, but for me. Then came the moment that felt like a full circle, though I didn't realize it at the time. It was a Friday, and I was at a networking event for local businesses, a mix of caterers, florists, and planners like me. I was sipping a glass of wine and chatting with a photographer I'd worked with before when I saw her, Lauren. She was across the room, her hair pulled back, her smile tight as she talked to someone I didn't recognize. My heart didn't race, didn't skip. I just watched her, curious, not angry. She looked tired. Not the glowing woman from Ethan's photos, but someone carrying a weight she hadn't expected. I didn't approach her, I didn't need to. But as I turned back to my conversation, I caught her eye for a split second, and she froze. I don't know if she knew who I was, if she'd connected the dots from the photo I'd sent. But in that moment, I saw something in her face. Recognition, maybe, or regret. I smiled, small and genuine, and turned away. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about knowing I'd walked through the fire and come out stronger. I drove home that night, the city lights soft through the rain-streaked windshield, and felt a quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. I thought about my grandmother, her voice clear as ever. You write your story. I was writing it one choice at a time. Not a story of revenge or triumph, but of resilience, of finding joy in the small things, of learning to love myself first. As I pulled into my driveway, the porch light flickered, still on its last legs. I made a mental note to fix it tomorrow. For now, I stepped inside, kicked off my shoes, and let the warmth of my home wrap around me. The future was out there waiting, but tonight, I was content to just be. The warmth of my home settled over me like a soft blanket as I closed the door behind me, the faint creak of the hinges a familiar sound. I stood there for a moment, my keys dangling in my hand, the quiet of the house wrapping around me. It wasn't the kind of quiet that felt heavy anymore, the kind that used to remind me of Ethan's absence. Now it was a canvas, ready for whatever I chose to paint on it. I dropped my keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, a thrift store find with a chipped edge that I loved anyway, and headed to the kitchen. The rain was still falling outside, a gentle patter against the windows, and I flicked on the kettle, craving something warm to hold Dot. As the water heated, I leaned against the counter, my eyes catching on the small things that made this space mine. The stack of cookbooks on the shelf, dog-eared from late-night recipe experiments. The magnet on the fridge, a souvenir from a solo trip to Savannah last year, shaped like a peach. The faint smudge of paint on the wall where I'd gotten carried away with my bedroom project. These weren't just things. They were proof of a life I was building piece by piece on my own terms. I thought about Lauren again, her face at the networking event, the way her eyes had widened for that split second. I didn't feel triumph, not exactly, but there was a quiet satisfaction in knowing I'd walked away from Ethan's chaos and she hadn't. Not yet, at least. I wondered what her story was, what had drawn her to him, what kept her there, but it wasn't my place to know. I'd given her the truth, and what she did with it was her own path to walk. The kettle clicked off, and I poured hot water over a tea bag, the steam curling up with the scent of chamomile. I carried the mug to the living room, sinking into the couch with a sigh. The rain was louder now, a steady drum against the roof, and I let it lull me into a memory I hadn't visited in years. I was 7, maybe 8, sitting cross-legged on my mom's bedroom floor while she got ready for a rare night out. She was humming to herself, brushing blush across her cheeks, her reflection smiling in the mirror. I'd asked her why she was so happy, and she'd turned to me, her eyes soft. Because tonight, Claire, I'm just me. Not a mom, not a wife, just me. I hadn't understood it then, but now, curled up on my couch, I did. There was a freedom in being just me, not Ethan's fiancée, not the woman who'd planned a perfect wedding, just Claire. The next morning, I woke to a world washed clean by the rain. The sky was a brilliant blue, the kind that made you want to step outside and breathe deep. I decided to skip my usual run and walk instead, winding through the streets of my neighborhood, where the old oaks draped their branches over the sidewalks like protective arms. The air smelled of wet grass and magnolias, and I found myself smiling at nothing, at everything. The way a dog bounded after a ball in a yard, the way a kid wobbled on a bike while his dad jogged behind. These were the moments I'd missed when I was lost in Ethan's shadow, the ones that reminded me life was still happening. With or without him, work was steady, a rhythm I'd come to rely on. We were deep into planning Carla's holiday party now, and I was spending my days coordinating vendors and tweaking menus. Carla was a dream client, clear about what she wanted, but open to ideas, and I found myself looking forward to our meetings. One afternoon, she stopped by the office with a box of homemade cookies, her way of saying thanks for the extra hours we'd put in. "You've got a gift, Claire," she said, handing me the box. "You make people feel seen." I blushed, brushing it off, but her words stayed with me, A reminder that my work wasn't just about logistics, it was about connection. Julian was there when I opened the box, snagging a cookie before I could stop him. You're going to have to share, he said, grinning as he took a bite. I rolled my eyes but pushed the box toward him, and we sat there, eating cookies and talking about nothing important. His latest Netflix binge, my failed attempt at baking bread. It was easy with him, the kind of easy I hadn't realized I needed until it was there. I caught myself watching him sometimes, the way his hands moved when he talked, the way his laugh lines crinkled around his eyes. It wasn't a crush, not exactly, but it was something warm, something that made me wonder what it would be like to let someone in again. That evening, I went for a drive, no destination in mind. I rolled the windows down, let the cool air tangle my hair, and turned up the radio. Some old song about heartbreak and starting over. Charleston unfolded around me. Cobblestone streets, pastel houses, the glow of gas lamps against the dusk. I ended up at the waterfront, parking near the pier where couples strolled and kids chased seagulls. I sat on a bench, my hands in my pockets, and watched the waves lap against the shore, the rhythm steady, unending. I thought about my dad again, not the graduation moment this time, but a quieter one. I was 10, and he'd taken me fishing on a lake, just the two of us. We didn't catch anything, but we sat there for hours, the water still, the air thick with summer. He'd told me a story about a fish that got away, his hands waving as he exaggerated the size, and I'd laughed until my sides hurt. It was one of the last good days before he left, before the fights with my mom got loud and the house got quiet. I didn't know why that memory came back now, but it made me think about the stories we tell ourselves, the ones we hold on to, the ones we let go. I was starting to let go of Ethan's story, the one where I was the fool, the one where his betrayal defined me. I was writing a new one, not with grand gestures or dramatic endings, but with small, deliberate choices, like signing up for a pottery class with Rachel, even though I knew I'd be terrible at it. Like buying a plane ticket to visit my cousin in Portland next month just because I could. Like letting myself notice the way Julian's smile made my day a little brighter without needing to know what it meant. A week later, I was at the office wrapping up a call with a florist when Rachel texted me a screenshot. It was a post from Ethan's account, but it wasn't a photo of him and Lauren. It was just him, standing on a beach somewhere, his smile forced, the caption vague. Learning to be better. I stared at it, waiting for the old ache to surface, but it didn't. Rachel's text followed. Looks like karma's doing its thing. I laughed, typing back, let it. I didn't need to know the details, didn't need to see him fall to feel whole. His story wasn't mine anymore. That night, I sat on my porch again, the swing swaying gently under me. The porch light was new now, a brass fixture I'd installed myself, its glow steady against the dark. I held a notebook in my lap, not the one from the wedding plans, but a new one where I'd started jotting down ideas. Not just for work, but for me. A trip to Italy someday, maybe. A garden in the backyard. A dog, one that would curl up next to me on nights like this. They weren't plans, not yet, just possibilities, and that was enough. I looked out at the street, where the neighbor's cat slunk through the shadows, and thought about my mom's words from that car all those years ago. You're bigger than that. I was. Bigger than Ethan's lies. Bigger than the pain. Bigger than the life I'd thought I wanted. I was Claire, and I was writing my story. One quiet, beautiful moment at a time. The notebook in my lap felt heavier than it should have, not from the weight of the paper, but from the possibilities I'd scribbled inside. I traced my finger over the words Italy, garden, dog, like they were seeds I was planting, not sure yet what they'd grow into. The night air was cool, the kind that made you want to linger outside, and I leaned back in the swing, letting it rock me gently. The neighbor's cat paused at the edge of my yard, its eyes glinting in the glow of the new porch light before it darted off into the dark. I smiled, thinking how life was like that sometimes. Fleeting moments you catch out of the corner of your eye, gone before you can hold them. I closed the notebook and set it on the swing beside me, my hands wrapping around the mug of tea I'd brought out. It was cold now, but I didn't mind. The stars were out, sharp against the Charleston sky, and I let myself sink into the quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything from you. I thought about Ethan's post, the one Rachel had sent, and the forced smile that didn't learning to be better he'd written. And I wondered if he meant it, if he was capable of it. Not that it mattered. His journey was his own, and I was done carrying the weight of it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my alarm, a soft chime that pulled me from a dream about the ocean, waves curling over my toes. I lay there for a moment, the room still dark, and felt a flicker of excitement for the day ahead. It wasn't anything big, just another day of work, a pottery class with Rachel in the evening, maybe a walk by the water if I had the energy. But it was mine, and that was enough. I got dressed, pulling on a soft green sweater that always made me feel put together, and headed to the kitchen. The smell of coffee filled the air as I brewed a pot, the machine gurgling like an old friend. I stood by the window watching the first light creep over the trees and thought about my mom again. Not the moment in the car, but a quieter one years later when I was in college. I'd come home for the weekend, stressed about exams, and found her in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt, planting tulip bulbs. She'd looked up, her hands muddy, and said, "You don't always see the flowers right away, Claire, but you plant them anyway." I hadn't thought much of it then, but now, sipping my coffee, I saw it for what it was. Her way of teaching me patience, trust in the slow work of growth. Work was a steady hum, the kind of day where everything clicked. I met with Carla again, going over the final details for her holiday party. She'd brought a photo of her team, a group of smiling faces from their last retreat, and we talked about ways to make the event feel personal, a slideshow of memories, a toast to their hard work. "You're not just planning a party," she said as we wrapped up, her eyes warm. "You're giving them a moment to hold on to." I nodded, my throat tight, because that's what I loved about my job, not the logistics, but the way it let me weave meaning into someone else's story. Julian was in the office too, his desk as chaotic as ever. He was on the phone when I walked by, but he waved me over, covering the receiver with his hand. "You free for lunch?" he whispered, his grin boyish. I hesitated, then nodded. "Only if you're buying," I teased, and he laughed, the sound carrying across the room. We ended up at a sandwich shop down the street, the kind with checkered tablecloths and a jukebox in the corner. We talked about work, about his dog's latest obsession with stealing socks, about the time I tried to surf and ended up with a mouthful of sand. It was easy, like it always was with him, and I found myself wondering what it would be like to lean into that ease, to let it grow into something more. That evening, I met Rachel at the pottery studio, a small space tucked behind a bookstore, the air thick with the smell of clay and glaze. She was already there, her apron smeared with gray, her hands shaping a lump of clay into something that might have been a vase. "You're late," she called, but her grin gave her away. I tied on an apron and sat at the wheel next to her, the clay cool and slick under my fingers. The instructor, a woman with silver hair and a patient smile, showed me how to center the clay, but mine kept wobbling, collapsing into a sad lump. Rachel laughed so hard she nearly fell off her stool, and I flicked a bit of clay at her, both of us dissolving into giggles like we were kids again. Driving home, my hands still smelling faintly of clay, I felt lighter than I had in months. The city was quiet, the streets gleaming under the streetlights, and I rolled the windows down, letting the cool air rush in. I thought about the pottery class, the way my hands had fumbled but kept trying, and it felt like a metaphor for my life right now. Messy, imperfect, but moving towards something real. The next few weeks were a blur of small, grounding moments. I started a garden in my backyard, nothing fancy, just a few herbs and some wildflowers I hoped would survive my novice touch. I'd spend evenings out there, the dirt under my nails, the sunset painting the sky in shades of peach and lavender. I'd think about my mom's tulip bulbs, the way she'd trusted they'd bloom, and I'd feel a quiet pride in my own planting, my own patience. One Saturday, I was at the market picking out lemons for a recipe I wanted to try when I saw Ethan. Not in person, thank God, but on a magazine cover at the checkout, some local business feature about young entrepreneurs. His smile was the same, all charm and confidence, but I could see the strain in his eyes, the kind you only notice when you've known someone too well. I didn't buy the magazine and didn't linger. I paid for my lemons and walked out, the sun warm on my face, the weight of him lighter than ever. That night, I had dinner with Julian, not a date, but something close, a quiet restaurant by the water, the kind where the candles flicker and the wine glasses catch the light. We talked about our childhoods, about the time he broke his arm trying to impress a girl, about the summer I spent reading every book in the library. I told him about Ethan, not the whole story, but enough. And he listened, his eyes steady. No judgment, just presence. When we parted ways, he hugged me, quick and warm, and I drove home with a smile I couldn't shake. The real turning point came a month later at Carla's holiday party. The venue was perfect, a historic hall with high ceilings and twinkling lights, the air filled with laughter and clinking glasses. I stood at the edge of the room watching Carla's team dance and toast, their faces bright with joy. Julian was there helping with the setup, and he found me during a quiet moment, a glass of champagne in his hand. You did this, he said, nodding at the room. You made this happen. I shook my head, but he wouldn't let it go. Take the credit, Claire. You're incredible. We stepped outside for air, the night crisp, the stars bright overhead. I don't know who moved first, but we kissed, soft and tentative, like we were both surprised by it. When we pulled back, I laughed, nervous, and he grinned, his hand brushing mine. Was that okay? He asked, and I nodded, my heart full in a way I hadn't thought possible. As I drove home, the city lights blurring past, I thought about my grandmother, her voice clear as ever. You write your story. I was writing it, not just with Julian, but with every choice, every moment I claimed for myself. The road ahead was open, uncertain, but mine, and I was ready to see where it led. The hum of my car's engine was a soft underscore to the night as I drove home, the taste of champagne and Julian's kiss lingering on my lips. The streets of Charleston were quiet, the gas lamps casting golden pools on the sidewalks, and I felt a warmth in my chest that wasn't just from the wine. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something alive, something that made my heart beat a little faster, like the first green shoot pushing through the soil after a long winter. I rolled the window down, letting the cool air tangle my hair, and smiled at the stars winking above, as if they were in on the secret of this moment. When I pulled into my driveway, the new porch light glowed steady, a small triumph I hadn't fully appreciated until now. I sat in the car for a minute, the engine off, the silence settling around me. I thought about Julian's grin, the way his hand had brushed mine, the way he'd looked at me like I was someone worth seeing. It wasn't like the way Ethan used to look at me, all flash and promises. Julian's gaze was quieter, steadier, like he saw the parts of me I was still learning to love. I wasn't ready to dive into anything new, not head first, but I was open to it, and that felt like a victory in itself. Inside comma. I kicked off my heels and padded to the kitchen, the hardwood cool under my feet. I poured a glass of water, the faucet's soft gurgle mixing with the distant sound of crickets outside. The house was still, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It was full of me, my books on the shelves, my herbs on the windowsill, the faint scent of lavender from the candle I'd lit last night. I carried the glass to the living room and sank onto the couch, tucking my legs under me. The memory of the party played in my mind. Carla's team laughing, the clink of glasses, Julian's voice saying, "You're incredible." I let it sink in, let myself believe it, not just for tonight, but for good. I thought about my mom again, a memory that surfaced like a Polaroid developing in the dark. I was 13, and we were baking cookies in our old kitchen, the one with the yellow linoleum and the fridge that always hummed too loud. I'd spilled flour on the counter, a white cloud that made us both laugh, and she'd handed me a damp cloth saying, "Mistakes don't ruin things, Claire. They just make the story better." I hadn't thought of that moment in years, but now, sitting in my quiet house, I saw the truth in it. Ethan was a mistake, a big one, but he didn't ruin me. He was just a chapter, and the story was still mine to tell. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window, the kind of light that makes everything feel possible. I lay there for a moment, the sheets soft against my skin, and let myself feel the lightness that had been growing inside me. It wasn't perfect. I still had moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I'd ever fully trust again, but it was real. I got up, pulled on my running clothes, and headed out, the air crisp with the promise of fall. The marsh trail was quiet, just me and the herons, their long legs stalking through the water. My sneakers pounded the dirt, my breath steady, and I felt a surge of gratitude for my body, for its strength, for the way it carried me through the pain and into this new season. I stopped at the water's edge, hands on my hips, and watched the tide pull back, revealing shells and bits of seaweed. It reminded me of myself, the way I'd been stripped bare by Ethan's betrayal, but was finding treasures in the aftermath. Resilience, clarity, a quiet kind of joy. Work was a whirlwind, but I thrived in it. Carla's party had been a success and word was spreading. New clients were calling, small businesses, and couples who wanted events that felt personal, meaningful. I spent my days sketching out ideas, meeting with vendors, losing myself in the details that used to feel like a lifeline and now felt like a passion. Julian was there too, his presence a constant that I didn't take for granted. We hadn't kissed again, hadn't defined whatever was sparking between us, but there was an ease to our time together, a rhythm that felt natural. One afternoon, we were setting up for a small engagement party, stringing fairy lights across a garden patio. The air was warm, the scent of jasmine heavy, and I was on a ladder, untangling a strand of bulbs. Julian stood below, holding the ladder steady, his head tilted up. You ever think about doing this for yourself again? He asked, his voice casual but curious. I paused, my hand still on the lights. What, getting married? I said, glancing down. He shrugged, a half smile on his lips. Yeah, or just planning something big for you. I thought about it, the idea of a wedding, a future, and realized it didn't scare me anymore. Maybe, I said, smiling back, but it'd have to be my kind of big, small, real, no pretense. He nodded like he understood, and we went back to work, the moment settling between us like dust and sunlight. That evening, I went to Rachel's pottery class again, my hands still clumsy on the wheel, but less hesitant. We laughed through the mess, our aprons smeared with clay, and I felt a spark of pride when my lump of clay started to resemble a bowl. Rachel nudged me, her eyes gleaming. Look at you, Picasso. You're going to open a shop soon. I rolled my eyes, but her words stayed with me. The idea that I could create something new, something mine. A few days later, I got a call from my cousin in Portland, the one I was planning to visit. She was excited, rattling off ideas for our trip. Hiking, coffee shops, a bookstore she swore I'd love. As we talked, I felt a flutter of anticipation, not just for the trip, but for the life I was stepping into. I was saying yes to things again, not out of obligation or fear of missing out, but because I wanted to, because they felt right. Then came a quiet moment that felt like a gift. I was at the market picking out apples for a pie when I saw Lauren again. She was at the other end of the aisle, her cart half full, her eyes on a bag of oranges. She didn't see me, and I didn't call out, but I watched her for a moment, the way her shoulders were straighter, her movements less weary than they'd been at the networking event. I didn't know her story, didn't need to, but I felt a quiet kinship, like we'd both walked through the same fire and come out changed. I paid for my apples and left, the sun warm on my face, the weight of the past lighter than ever. That night, I baked the pie, the kitchen filling with the smell of cinnamon and sugar. I ate a slice on the porch, the swing creaking under me, the stars bright overhead. I thought about my grandmother, her hands shelling peas, her voice steady. You write your story. I was writing it not with grand gestures or fairy tale endings, but with every choice, every moment I claimed for myself. The pie was imperfect, the crust a little uneven, but it was mine and it was delicious. As I sat there, the night air cool against my skin, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest. The future was out there, full of possibilities I couldn't yet see, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I was Claire, and I was enough. The last bite of pie lingered on my tongue, sweet and warm. The kind of taste that made you want to close your eyes and savor it. I set the plate on the swing beside me, the porcelain clinking softly against the wood, and leaned back, letting the night wrap around me. The air was crisp now, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from somewhere down the street, and the stars seemed to pulse with a rhythm I could almost feel. I didn't want to go inside yet, didn't want to break the spell of this moment, where the world felt both vast and intimate, like it was whispering just to me. I thought about the pie, how I'd fumbled the crust, how the apples had been a little too tart, but how it had come together anyway. It was like my life these past few months, imperfect, messy, but good in a way I hadn't expected. I'd spent so long chasing perfection, trying to mold myself into the woman Ethan wanted, the one who could plan a flawless wedding and smile through his half-hearted excuses. Now, I was learning to love the flaws, the uneven edges, the moments that didn't go according to plan. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out. expecting a text from Rachel or maybe Julian. It was an email, though, from a name I didn't recognize at first. I opened it, my eyes scanning the words, and realized it was from the photographer I'd met at the networking event, the one who'd been talking to Lauren. Claire, it read, I hope this isn't too forward, but I was so impressed with your work at the holiday party. I'm putting together a styled shoot for a wedding magazine, and I'd love to have you plan it. It's a big opportunity, national exposure. Let me know if you're interested. I read it twice, my heart doing a quiet flip. Not the frantic kind I used to feel with Ethan's texts, but something steadier, like a door opening. National exposure. It was the kind of thing I dreamed about early in my career before I'd let Ethan's ambitions overshadow mine. I set the phone down, my hands trembling slightly, not from nerves, but from the realization that I could say yes, that I wanted to. I thought about my grandmother, not her porch swing this time, but a moment when I was 15, sitting at her kitchen table while she kneaded dough for biscuits. I'd been complaining about a school project, how I'd worked so hard but still got a B. She dusted her hands on her apron, looked at me with those sharp eyes, and said, Claire, the world doesn't owe you an A. You do the work because it's yours, because it matters to you. I'd rolled my eyes then, but now, sitting on my porch, I felt the weight of her words. This shoot, this opportunity, it mattered to me. Not because of the magazine or the exposure, but because it was a chance to do what I loved, to show the world what I could create. Dot. The next morning, I woke early, the sky still gray, the air heavy with the promise of rain. I made coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I typed a reply to the photographer, my fingers steady. I'm in. Let's make something beautiful. I hit send before I could overthink it, and as the email whooshed away, I felt a spark of pride. The kind that comes from choosing yourself. Dot work was a blur of excitement and nerves. I met with the photographer, a woman named Mia with a quick laugh and a portfolio that took my breath away. We spent hours brainstorming, sketching out a vision for the shoot. A low country wedding with moss draped oaks, soft linens, and a palette of blush and sage. It was the kind of project that made my heart race, not with fear, but with possibility. I threw myself into it, coordinating vendors, scouting locations, pouring every ounce of my creativity into the details. Julian noticed the change, the way I was humming to myself as I worked, the way my desk was covered in fabric swatches and mood boards. You're lit up, he said one afternoon, leaning against my desk with a coffee in his hand. I laughed, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Is that a good thing? He grinned, his eyes crinkling. The best. We didn't talk about the kiss, didn't need to. It was there, a quiet thread between us, growing stronger with every shared laugh. Every moment we didn't rush. Dot. Rachel was my cheerleader, as always. We met for drinks one evening at a bar with exposed brick and the kind of cocktails that came with edible flowers. She raised her glass, her eyes gleaming. To Claire Mitchell, about to take over the wedding world. I clinked my glass against hers, laughing, but her words stayed with me. I wasn't trying to take over anything, but I was claiming my space, my voice, and that felt bigger than any magazine spread. Dot. The shoot was scheduled for a crisp November morning, and I woke before dawn, my stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. The location was a historic plantation just outside Charleston, its grounds lush with live oaks and azaleas. I arrived early, my breath visible in the chilly air, and watched the crew set up. Cameras, lights, a table draped in linen that caught the first rays of sun. Mia was there, her energy infectious, and we worked together like we'd been doing it for years. Adjusting flowers, tweaking place settings, making sure every detail was perfect. Dot. When the models arrived, a couple who looked genuinely in love, their hands always touching, I felt a pang, not of sadness, but of hope. I didn't need what they had, not now, but I could imagine it, could see it in my future, not as a desperate need, but as a possibility. The shoot went better than I dreamed. The light soft and golden, the setting like something out of a painting. By the time we wrapped, my cheeks hurt from smiling, and Mia hugged me, whispering, This is going to be huge. Driving home, the sky streaked with pink and orange, I felt a quiet triumph settle in my chest. Not because of the shoot, though that was part of it, but because I'd done it for me. Not for Ethan, not for approval, but for the woman I was becoming. The one who could stand in her own light and not flinch. Dot. That night, I sat on my porch again, the swing creaking under me, a blanket over my legs. The air was cold now, the stars sharp against the dark, and I held a mug of hot chocolate, the steam curling up like a prayer. I thought about my mom, her hands in the dirt, planting bulbs she wouldn't see bloom for months. I thought about my grandmother, her voice steady, her hands sure. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who'd loved Ethan with everything she had, and I didn't hate her. She'd gotten me here, to this moment, to this swing, to this life. I pulled out my notebook, the one with my scribbled dreams, and added a new one. Keep creating. Not just events, but moments, connections, a life that felt true ascending. I flipped to a new page and wrote, Stay open. To love, to risk, to the messy, beautiful, unknown dot. As I closed the notebook, the porch light glowed steady, and I looked out at the night, the world quiet and full of promise. I was Claire, and my story wasn't finished. It was just beginning, one brave, beautiful step at a time. The hot chocolate had gone lukewarm in my hands, but I sipped it anyway, the sweetness grounding me as I sat on the porch swing, the night stretching out before me. The air was sharp now, the kind of cold that nipped at your fingertips, and I tucked the blanket tighter around my legs, the wool scratching softly against my skin. The stars above Charleston seemed to lean closer, their light steady, like they were witnesses to this quiet transformation I was living through. I set the mug down, the ceramic clinking against the swing's armrest, and let my eyes trace the shadows of the oak tree in my yard, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. I thought about the shoot again, the way the morning had unfolded like a dream, the soft light, the laughter, the way every detail had come together. It wasn't just a job well done, it was a declaration, a line drawn in the sand between the woman I'd been and the one I was becoming. I'd spent so long building things for other people, Ethan's dreams, our wedding, a life that was never really mine. Now I was building for me, and the weight of that felt like freedom. My mind drifted to a memory, one I hadn't touched in years. I was 9, maybe 10, sitting on the back steps of our old house, the one with the peeling paint and the screen door that always slammed too loud. My mom was inside, arguing with my dad on the phone, her voice sharp but tired. I'd snuck out to the steps with a popsicle, the grape kind that stained my fingers purple, and sat there watching fireflies blink in the dusk. I didn't understand their fight, not really, but I remember feeling small, like the world was too big and I was just a speck in it. Then my mom came out, her face softer, and sat beside me. She didn't say anything, just took my sticky hand in hers and watched the fireflies with me. We're okay, she'd said finally, and I believed her. Not because it was true, but because she was there. Sitting on my porch now, I felt the echo of that moment, the way my mom's presence had made the world feel manageable again. I was doing that for myself now, showing up, holding my own hand through the dark. Ethan's betrayal had made me feel small, like that girl on the steps, but I wasn't her anymore. I was the one who'd planted herbs in the backyard, who'd laughed through a pottery class, who'd kissed Julian under the stars and didn't need to know what it meant yet. I was enough. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain, a soft patter against the roof that made me want to stay in bed. But I had a meeting with Mia, the photographer, to go over the shoot photos, so I pulled myself up, the air cool against my skin. I dressed in a sweater and jeans, my hair tossed into a messy bun, and grabbed a coffee on my way out, the barista's smile a small gift to start the day. The streets of Charleston were slick with rain, the cobblestones glistening, and I drove slowly, the wipers a steady rhythm against the windshield. Mia was waiting at a cafe downtown, her laptop open, her eyes bright with excitement. Claire, you're gonna love these, she said, sliding the laptop toward me. The photos were stunning. The couple laughing under the oaks, the table glowing with candlelight, the details I'd agonized over captured in a way that felt like magic. I scrolled through them, my heart swelling, not just with pride, but with gratitude. This is us, I said, my voice soft. We did this. Mia grinned, reaching across to squeeze my hand. And it's just the start. We spent the next hour planning the magazine submission, picking the best shots, drafting a story about the vision behind the shoot. It was work, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like dreaming out loud, like building something that could last. As I left the cafe, the rain had stopped, the sky breaking open to reveal patches of blue. I walked to my car, my boots splashing in puddles, and felt a lightness I hadn't known I could carry. Work kept me busy, but it was the kind of busy that fueled me. I was juggling new clients now, small weddings and corporate events, each one a chance to create something meaningful. Julian was there too, his presence a steady hum in the background of my days. We hadn't kissed again, but there were moments. His hand brushing mine as we passed a clipboard, his laugh when I tripped over a box of decorations. That felt like promises. Small and unspoken. One evening, I was at Rachel's, sprawled on her couch with a glass of wine, her latest pottery creation, a lopsided mug sitting on the coffee table. She was telling me about a guy she'd met at the studio, her eyes sparkling, and I listened, happy for her. But my mind kept drifting to Julian. You're thinking about him, aren't you? Rachel said, smirking. I laughed, caught. Maybe. She leaned forward, her voice serious now. You deserve this, Claire. Whatever it is, whoever he is. You deserve to be happy. Her words stayed with me as I drove home, the city lights soft through the windshield. I thought about happiness, how I'd once thought it was a destination, something I'd find with Ethan, with a ring, with a perfect life. Now I saw it in the small things, the way my herbs were sprouting in the backyard, the way Julian's laugh made my day brighter, the way I could sit alone in my house and not feel lonely. Happiness wasn't something I was chasing anymore. It was something I was living. A few days later, I got a package in the mail, a thick envelope with the magazine's logo in the corner. I opened it on the porch, my hands trembling, and pulled out a proof copy of the issue. There it was, my shoot, spread across 6 glossy pages, my name in the credits, alongside Mia's. I sat on the swing, the pages open in my lap, and let the moment sink in. This wasn't just a job, not just a project. It was proof that I could build something beautiful, something lasting, even after everything had fallen apart. I thought about my dad strangely in that moment. Not the man who left, but the one who'd stood at my graduation. His hands in his pockets, his eyes unsure. He'd written in that card, "You're stronger than I ever was." I hadn't believed it then, but now, holding the magazine, I did. I was stronger, not because I'd fought a big battle or won a dramatic victory, but because I'd kept going, kept creating, kept choosing myself. That night, I invited Julian over for dinner, nothing fancy. Just pasta and salad, the kind of meal that feels like home. We ate at my kitchen table, the candlelight flickering, our laughter filling the room. He told me about his childhood, about the time he tried to build a treehouse and ended up with a sprained ankle. I told him about the fireflies, about my mom's hand in mine, about the way I was learning to trust myself again. When he reached for my hand across the table, I didn't pull away. As we cleared the dishes, the rain starting up again outside, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest. This wasn't a fairy tale, not a perfect ending, but it was real. It was mine. I thought about my grandmother, her voice clear as ever. You write your story. I was writing it, one moment, one choice, one brave step at a time. And as I stood in my kitchen, Julian's laughter mixing with the sound of the rain, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The rain was a soft murmur against the kitchen window as Julian and I finished the dishes, the clink of plates mingling with our easy laughter. His sleeve was rolled up, a dish towel slung over his shoulder, and I caught myself watching the way his hands moved, steady and sure, as he dried a glass. The candle on the table was burning low, its flame flickering in the draft, and the air smelled faintly of garlic and wax. I leaned against the counter, wiping my hands on a towel, and felt a warmth that wasn't just from the meal or the wine. It was the kind of warmth that comes from being seen, from standing in a moment that feels like it belongs to you. Julian set the glass down and turned to me, his grin soft, his eyes catching the candlelight. You're quiet, he said. Not a question, just an observation. I smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Just thinking, I said. And he nodded, like he understood there was more, but didn't need to push. We stood there for a moment, the rain filling the silence, and I realized how far I'd come from the woman who'd sat in this same kitchen months ago, staring at a photo that shattered her world. That Claire had been afraid of silence, afraid of what it might reveal. This Claire, this me, wasn't afraid anymore. I was learning to trust the quiet, to find myself in it. Dottie left not long after. A quick hug at the door, his breath warm against my cheek. See you tomorrow, he said, and I watched him jog through the rain to his car, the porch light casting his shadow long across the driveway. I closed the door, the lock clicking softly, and stood in the hallway, my hand lingering on the knob. The house was still, but it wasn't empty. It was full of me, my choices, my dreams, the life I was stitching together one small, brave moment at a time. I woke the next morning to a sky washed clean, the kind of blue that makes you want to step outside and breathe deep. The air was crisp, the first real bite of winter, and I pulled on a scarf before heading to the office. The magazine feature was out now, the glossy pages sitting on my desk, and I'd gotten a flood of emails, new clients, colleagues, even a few strangers who'd seen the spread and wanted to work with me. It was overwhelming, but not in a bad way. It was the kind of overwhelming that comes from realizing you're capable of more than you thought. Dot work was a whirlwind, but I moved through it with a clarity I hadn't had before. I was planning a winter wedding now, a small affair for a couple who'd met later in life, their love quiet but fierce. Watching them during a consultation, the way they finished each other's sentences, the way their hands found each other without thinking, I felt a pang, not of longing, but of recognition. I didn't need what they had, not yet, but I could see it in my future, and not as a desperate hope, but as a possibility I was open to. And that openness, that willingness to let life surprise me was a transformation I hadn't expected. I wasn't the Claire who'd clung to Ethan's promises, who'd built her world around someone else's whims. I was someone new, someone who trusted herself first. That afternoon, I was at the market picking out rosemary for a recipe when I heard my name. I turned, expecting Rachel or a coworker, but it was Lauren. She stood a few feet away, her cart half full, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her eyes were nervous, but there was a steadiness to her I hadn't seen before. Claire, she said again, softer, like she was testing the word. I nodded, my hand still on the rosemary, the scent sharp under my fingers. Hi, I said, and waited, not sure what she wanted, not sure I needed to know. She took a breath, her fingers tightening on her cart. I owe you an apology, she said, her voice low but clear. I didn't know about you, not at first. Ethan, he made it sound like you were over, like it was just him. When you sent that photo, She stopped, her eyes dropping to the floor, then back to me. I ended it. I should have done it sooner. Should have done. I'm sorry. I stood there, the market humming around us, carts creaking, a child laughing somewhere down the aisle, and felt a quiet shift inside me. I'd expected anger, maybe, or satisfaction, but all I felt was calm. You don't owe me anything, I said, and meant it. You did what you needed to do, so did I. She nodded, her shoulders relaxing, and for a moment, we were just two women who'd walked through the same fire, carrying our own scars. Thank you, she said, and turned away, her cart rolling softly down the aisle. As I paid for my groceries, the weight of her words settled over me. Not heavy, but grounding. Ethan's consequences weren't mine to deliver, but they'd come anyway. Lauren's apology, her choice to walk away, was proof of that. I didn't need to see him fall to know he'd lost something. Her, me, the life he'd taken for granted. I'd heard through mutual friends that his business was struggling, that the charm he relied on wasn't enough to keep clients when his promises fell through. He was still out there, still smiling for the cameras, but it was a hollow kind of shine, the kind that fades when the spotlight moves on Dot driving home. The sun low and golden. I thought about justice, how it wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet, like the way Ethan's life was unraveling without me needing to lift a finger. He'd built his world on lies, and now he was living in the rubble. I didn't wish him pain, not anymore. I just didn't wish him anything at all. He was a chapter I'd closed, a story I'd stopped telling, a. The months that followed were a slow, steady unfolding. The magazine feature opened doors I hadn't expected. More shoots, bigger clients, even a call from a TV producer interested in a wedding planning segment. I didn't say yes to everything, but I said yes to what felt right, what made my heart hum with possibility. I started my own business, a small event planning company with a focus on intimate, meaningful moments. It was terrifying, leaving the safety of my old job, but it was mine. And every late night, every client meeting, every moment of doubt was worth it. Julian was there through it all. Not as a partner, not yet, but as something more than a friend. We'd go for walks by the water, our shoulders brushing, our conversations weaving through the serious and the silly. One evening, as we sat on a bench watching the sunset, he told me about his mom, how she'd raised him alone, how her strength had shaped him. She'd like you, he said, his voice soft, and I felt a warmth spread through me. not just for him, but for the life I was building. One where I could be liked, loved, for exactly who I was. Rachel, too, was a constant. Her laughter a lifeline, her pottery classes a weekly reminder to embrace the mess. We'd sit in her apartment, drinking wine and talking about nothing and everything. Her new relationship, my business, the way life kept surprising us. "You're glowing," she said one night, her eyes sharp. "Not because of Julian, not because of work, because of you." I laughed, but I knew she was right. The glow wasn't from outside, it was from the woman I'd become, the one who'd learned to love herself first. I visited my cousin in Portland that spring, a trip that felt like a promise kept to myself. We hiked through forests that smelled of pine and earth, drank coffee in cozy shops, lost ourselves in bookstores with creaking floors. I came home with a suitcase full of books and a heart full of clarity. I wasn't running from anything anymore, not Ethan, not the past. I was running toward myself, toward the life I wanted. One step at a time. One evening, back in Charleston, I was in my backyard, tending to the wildflowers I'd planted, their petals bright against the dusk. The air was warm, the scent of jasmine heavy, and I knelt in the dirt, my hands gentle as I pulled weeds. I thought about my mom, her tulip bulbs, her quiet faith in things unseen. I thought about my grandmother, her hands kneading dough, her voice steady. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who'd loved Ethan with everything she had, and I felt a tenderness for her, not pity, but love. She'd gotten me here, to this garden, to this moment, to this life. I stood, brushing the dirt from my hands, and looked out at the horizon, where the last light lingered, soft and golden. The world was quiet, the stars just beginning to show, and I felt a peace that wasn't fleeting, but rooted, like the flowers at my feet. I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. There were dreams to chase, risks to take, love to find, or maybe just to nurture within myself. But I was ready, not because I had all the answers, but because I trusted the woman I'd become to find them. I walked to the porch, the swing waiting, and sat, the creak of the chains a familiar song. I opened my notebook, the one with my scribbled dreams, and wrote a single word: enough. It wasn't a question, not a plea, but a truth. I closed the notebook, leaned back, and let the night hold me, my heart full, my story mine.